everyone. So we are having our second workshop day on draft 3 of the Kratz paper today. So this will be basically the same process as the first time we did it. If you remember, for the first workshop, I gave you a list of 5 sort of main points to focus on. So we've got that as well today, different main points, similar in some ways, other ways different. So I've passed those along to our new TA, but let me tell you them as well. So number 1, does the paper have any problems with show don't tell? A phrase I wrote on many of your papers, and I'm going to be talking about what it means in just a moment. Number 2, are there any places in the paper where more scenes could have been written? Scenes are always, almost always more interesting. They grab the reader's attention better, so we want to use as many of those as possible. Number 3, what is the main theme of this paper? If you can't answer the question, that's a problem. It means the theme is not clear, and this is something to be worked on in the optional 4th draft. Number 4, what insight does this paper give into the life of its author? A paper like this, you should understand the person who wrote it better once you're done reading it than you did before you began. I know I said 5. I actually have 6 this time. 6 points to discuss. Number 5, do you think that the revisions the author has made since the first draft have improved the paper? So since you're working with the same folks, you can hopefully remember back to what they wrote in their first draft, and you can sort of compare, see if you, because sometimes revision is important. Revision improves our writing. Sometimes there are revisions that just don't work, and sometimes we have to go back to where we started. And finally, number 6, and this is the most important one. Now, you'll probably recall, hopefully, that the third draft is the final required draft, but there is an option, if you feel like you need to do it, there is an option to do a 4th draft, which you would submit at the end of the semester along with the portfolio. So the 5th and most important question for this workshop is the paper now done? Can the 3rd draft be the final draft? Or should your workshop partner consider working on a 4th draft? So those are the main points to discuss. Now, I also wanted to talk to you, my main point in this video, I wanted to talk to you about some of the common feedback that I gave on many, many papers. So some phrases that many of you saw in your written feedback would be show don't tell, mentioning about writing a scene rather than writing summary, and finally my requests to be more specific. So again, these are things that came up in many papers. So rather than me typing away on every single one of your papers an explanation of what these mean, it's much more efficient for me to just talk to all of you guys together. So let's go over what I mean by all these. Now, show don't tell. This is one of the biggest cliches of teaching writing. This phrase will appear in the feedback of many, many of your papers. So when you show something, well, let me back up. When you tell something, you're just directly saying it, okay? This is a pen. This is a notebook. This is a DVD, right? Straightforward, to the point, simple, also kind of boring. Especially when we're talking about life and life experience. Just saying this is a DVD is okay, or this is a pen, because they're not that interesting. We've all seen a pen before, we've all seen a DVD before. But you're not writing about pens and DVDs, you're writing about your own lives, your families, your hometowns, your countries. These are much more complex, much more interesting. So just telling, it's not always wrong. Sometimes, in order for a paper to make sense, you need to do a little bit of telling. But most often, you want to show rather than to tell. So, I thought of an example. If I were writing a paper like yours, this is a story I might tell. Now, let me start by telling, and then I will show. Okay? So, telling. I was 15. No, that's wrong. I was 17 years old. I was taking a shower. The tub was very wet. I slipped and fell. I caught my toe, and I gave myself a very bad cut. I had to go to the hospital. I got 15 stitches in my toe. Okay, that's showing. That's telling. That's telling. Again, straightforward, to the point. It's easy to do, but it's not very interesting. So now let's try this with showing. And I'm just doing this off the top of my head, so we'll see how it goes. It was late at night when I finished my shower. I was staying at my parents' house. I turned the water off, but there was still soap on the bathtub floor, so I could feel my feet slipping just a little bit with each step. As I went to step out of the bathtub and had one foot in the air and one on the ground, I slipped worse than I had before. I tried to grab onto the shower curtain to steady myself, but I came up empty. My toe caught in the tracks of the sliding door, the metal tracks of the sliding door, and the skin razored off the bottom of my toe in a V-shaped wound. Suddenly, in this wet bathtub, instead of white tile, it was red or pink from blood diluted with water. At first, it didn't even hurt, but I screamed out from shock of what I had seen, of all this blood flowing out of my toe. My mother knocked on the door asking what was wrong. I told her to give me a minute to put on some clothes, and then I thought we had to go to the emergency room. By this point, I was a little bit dizzy and starting to feel the pain. Okay, so I have showed instead of told, right? So it's much more detailed, it's much more specific. At no point in this did I ever say that, did I ever directly tell you about pain I might have been feeling. I didn't directly tell you that, that I was shocked or scared, but you can tell, you connect with it more deeply. So showing rather than telling is more difficult. It takes more work, but it's much more interesting, much more compelling. Now, with these two examples, ask yourself, which one is more interesting? Which one would you rather read about in a paper? Well, with this example, maybe you'd rather not read about either because it's very painful. But you know what I mean. So the question of scene versus summary. So this is related. It's similar in some ways to show, don't tell, but subtly different. Now, oftentimes, when relatively inexperienced writers who aren't that familiar with writing something like a Crotts paper, they end up writing a lot of summaries. Again, this is easy to do, but it's not really that interesting. A better way to approach it is to think about writing a scene. A scene like you would see in a novel or a movie or a TV show. Whereas, summary is just like saying, it's like giving bullet points. This happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, with no details, no life. So, example I thought of to illustrate this one was from when I was, a couple years ago, I was with my family in Shrimangal on Eid Day. So, summary. After spending the morning visiting Muslim homes and witnessing the cattle sacrifice, our tour guide took us to the Hindu part of town, and he told us he was taking us to a place where mostly tourists don't visit. There was a small shrine, and since they don't usually see foreigners there, the children of the neighborhood all started following us and laughing and, having a great time just because these weird foreigners were walking along. Okay, so that's summary. Again, it's basic, straightforward, to the point. Now, if we try to think about this as a scene, and again, I'm making this up in my head as I'm talking to you, so my example may not be perfect, but I'll try my best. So, thinking about it, a scene. After we left the last Muslim home, and could still smell the scent of cattle blood, our tour guide turned and said, "Oh, sir, now we will go to my part of the city, to the Hindu part of the city. There is a very interesting shrine there, but usually tourists do not go. Would you like that?" My wife and I looked at each other and said, "Oh yes, that sounds very interesting." What we didn't count on was that since foreigners rarely went there, we were something of an attraction. The shrine was the attraction to us, but we were the attraction to the townspeople. As we began walking, a few children started walking along behind us, pointing and laughing and speaking excitedly in Bangla. As we walked a few more blocks, the crowd grew behind us. It grew in number of people and it grew in noise. More laughter, more Bangla, more talking, more excitement. Before we knew it, as we approached the shrine, we had attracted a couple dozen children from the neighborhood. I turned around and took out my phone and snapped a picture of the crowd we had attracted. The table turned on them, me paying attention to them instead of them paying attention to us. Several of the children looked shy and covered their mouths and giggled. So again, which one is more interesting? Which one is more compelling? Probably the second one. So yeah, think of it like a scene from a movie or a novel or a film. So finally, specific versus general. And again, this is fairly similar. They're all related. They all address a common problem with rough draft writing. So the issue of being specific versus general. It's always better to be more specific. Now, the example I thought of for this, a general statement versus more specific. So a general statement would be, I have a pet. Okay, boring. Good for you, but I don't really care hearing that. On the other hand, what if I tell you that I have, and the first two examples were real stories, this one clearly made up. Instead of saying I have a pet, what if I tell you I have a three-legged, one-eyed, toothless Royal Bengal tiger in my backyard, and he has the hiccups? Specific is always more interesting than general. So, you don't want to include just any detail. Not all detail is interesting. But you want to think of, as much interesting detail as possible. Okay, what makes what you're talking about different? What makes it unique? That is what readers are going to be interested in hearing. That's what they're going to connect with. That's what they're going to want to get more of. So, if I wrote these things in your paper, this is hopefully helpful in terms of what I meant by it. Okay, so I am going to end the video now. I don't want to take up any more time from your workshops, so you guys can go ahead and go into your groups and get into your workshops. So good luck with that, and I hope you have a great fall break. By the way, there are a couple of you who I really apologize, who sent me a couple of emails with questions about my feedback, and I meant to get back to you guys, and I didn't. I really apologize. So if you think you're going to work on it's too late now for the third draft, but if you think you are going to work on that fourth draft and you still want me to answer these questions, then please send me another email, ask me again, and I promise, I promise I will get back to you this time. Okay, so on to the workshop, and have a great fall break, and I will see you all in a couple weeks.